You're getting back in shape now. You've got a whole new attitude. To get the most from life, you know what you've got to do. Join the Cardiac Fitness Club now. Oh, the feeling can't be beat. Oh, no. And just a little exercise can get you right back on your feet. Oh, yeah.
No white coat, no stethoscope. Most of you have never seen me in this attire nor this setting. This September will mark the 42nd anniversary of my clinic and my work in cardiac rehabilitation and sports medicine. And I am honored that more than 56,000 patients have put their trust and confidence in me, my staff, and my clinic. I created this video for my patients and anyone else interested in my take on the COVID-19 crisis. On March 11th, after extensive discussion with my staff and supporting doctors, we realized we had to shut down our clinic. With government and health authorities' guidelines becoming more and more concerning and restrictive, and personal protective equipment, PPE, including face shields, N95 masks, gowns, gloves, and hand sanitizer, being unavailable from any of our suppliers, we had no option as safety of our patients and staff was paramount. To troubleshoot health issues, maintain contact, and provide support to all of our current patients, we followed ministry guidelines and started telephone and video telemedicine, as well as remote ECG email transmission from those that have the appropriate ECG devices. We canceled all appointments and practiced physical distancing with our staff. I realized the support provided at the clinic and the formal as well as informal group support of patients connecting and sharing with each other is very much valued by many patients. In his research, Dr. Dean Ornish and many others who have studied the benefits of group support have rated this to be the most valuable of the 4 components of Ornish's heart disease reversal program, the other components being exercise, diet, and stress management. Now that we are in isolation, in quarantine, and practicing social distancing, this clinic support and group support is hard to come by. Although I have given more than 12,000 cardiac lectures at an average of 1 hour each as part of the cardiac rehab program since 1978, and presented hundreds more lectures in the community and at medical meetings and conferences, I must say I now miss the various weekly classes and meetings in our seminar room. The smiling faces and camaraderie more often than not made my day. In the absence of these sessions, and who knows how long we will be without, I thought I would plan some fireside chats with you to keep in touch. I'm sorry I didn't have time to get the fire started. The first of these chats relates to the reason why we aren't together, the coronavirus. I started 3 weeks ago to organize my thoughts on what I wanted to include in this chat. I followed various medical sources and websites regarding COVID-19 and daily noticed tremendous change in the amount of data and content. Many more sources and websites appeared almost daily, mushrooming what I thought I should present to you. Like most of you, I spent the early part of March, and since that time, closely monitoring the news conferences held by our government leaders and authorities, both north and south of the border, and been rather disappointed in much of what was presented and how it was presented, and also what wasn't presented. Every day that I thought I was ready to start recording, the changing data and new information that day made me hesitant to proceed. I would add to and rewrite my notes and plan to record the next day, only to have the same problem day after day. This is definitely a moving target. I decided I couldn't include everything I planned in one session. So I plan to cover some of the content in further fireside chats, to include stress and psychological impact of COVID-19, heart and other body systems affected, exercise and social connecting while we are isolated, the reported significant advantage of lung exercise, particularly lung strengthening exercise, the result of recent antibody testing, and undoubtedly there would be changes in the core knowledge of this disease. Those not subscribed to the clinic announcement emails can subscribe at the new website launching any day now at shamanmd.com. Or you can subscribe to this YouTube channel if you want to be alerted to future fireside chat videos. Any questions or topics you would like to see covered, please enter these in the comments below, and I will do my best to do them justice. The World Health Organization reassured us for weeks that the Chinese viral flare-up was not transmitted by human spread, giving us a false sense of security and contributing to us being unprepared. The initial lack of transparency, and thankfully that is improving, particularly relating to data, the lack of testing, and the lack of personal protective equipment, made it difficult for many of us in the medical profession to feel in total solidarity with our country's spokespersons. I know of more than a dozen patients who were presumed positive for COVID-19, who were told they should self-isolate for 14 days and they didn't need testing. I assumed this was based on best practice protocol. To find out later, it was actually due to the lack of test kits. I was disturbed by the initial cavalier attitude, suggesting the disease caused by COVID-19 was mild, insignificant, and almost non-existent. The only people dying, and there weren't that many, were the elderly and those with pre-existing medical conditions. I understand the reason for this levity, hoping to not engender fear and anxiety. We've been told we are at war, but not with a traditional enemy, but rather an unseen deadly enemy like none previously faced. I don't consider myself a wartime strategist. However, I assume getting to know the enemy is a good idea. So I've been attempting to learn what I can from sources in the Orient, Europe, and North America. I was shocked by all of the missing information and all of the conflicting information. What has the world experience shown us? That only old people die of this disease has been frighteningly disproven. Doctors, medical workers, as well as members of the general public between 20 and 50 years of age have died. 70 doctors in Italy have already died. In a region of northern Italy, one of the worst hit regions in the world, 20% of the healthcare workforce have tested positive for COVID-19. The reality that doctors, nurses, and other healthcare workers are succumbing to the virus is beyond tragic, as many of these dedicated individuals are dying unnecessarily as a result of the no testing and no PPE fiascos. Accelerated medical school graduations have been announced, but these can't compensate for such losses, neither by the numbers lost nor by the experience lost. Our clinic telemedicine interaction with our patients initially showed that about 80% were reasonably following the recommended COVID-19 guidelines. An 80% result in a high school physics exam might be worth celebrating, not so for the coronavirus. Why have such a large number of our citizens not taken the COVID-19 threat seriously? I'm happy to say that with further follow-up with our patients, we are seeing a higher degree of compliance than the original 80%. My medical practice of 42 years, a large part of what I do is change people's behavior. This change in behavior or lifestyle change, probably more powerful than the prescription pad and the surgeon's knife, is not easy to adopt. Whereas swallowing a pill and being put to sleep for surgery are pretty passive, not requiring much willpower or commitment, significant changes in lifestyle require a major life effort. How I approach each patient is critical to the success of this endeavor. Often this approach varies from patient to patient. After all these years, I feel my success in this regard has become enhanced by practice and experience. So as I evaluate the approach of the COVID-19 news conferences, I feel that something is missing and left out. What seems to be missing is basic information about the virus and the concept and strategy of what we're really trying to do. Many everyday citizens don't appreciate the vital role they play in this crucial effort. Knowledge is power. By giving our citizens this knowledge and power, they may be more motivated and empowered to take ownership in this battle. By realizing each person plays a vital role in the war and each person makes a difference, they actually become part of the solution. After all, if one is not part of the solution, then they are part of the problem. So how would I approach it? Start with the basics. Keep it simple. Very simple. What is a virus? A virus is a non-living entity, much smaller than a bacteria. Viruses are made up of either RNA or DNA encased by a protein coat. RNA and DNA are molecules containing and transmitting genetic code. Bacteria are single-cellular living organisms that can reproduce on their own. Viruses are not alive and don't have cellular structures and the machinery needed to reproduce. Hence, they need a host. The genetic code in the RNA and DNA control all cellular function. In the case of the coronavirus, it uses its own RNA to inject into and then control host cells that it invades. In that way, the virus invades a host living cell and hijacks its genetic machinery in order to reproduce while damaging the cells that have been invaded and possibly killing the host. Instead of asking how long a virus can live outside of the body, we should ask how long it stays infectious. And this has to do with chemistry. As such, a virus, being a non-living entity, can't really die. It is said to disintegrate and at that point becomes non-infective. The outer protein layer of the virus has a lipid or fatty component, which is very sensitive to soap and high concentration alcohol, which cause it to lose its integrity, resulting in rapid disintegration and neutralization of the virus. Hence the importance of hand washing and hygiene. Evidence suggests that the primary modes of transmission of the coronavirus are via droplets and hand contact. Droplets from sneezing, coughing, talking, and breathing. Hand transmission by shaking hands and touching surfaces or objects that have very recently been contaminated by someone harboring the virus. We have evidence that a coronavirus shed by a human host can stay infective for some hours and questionably days on various surfaces. Published in the New England Journal of Medicine in the second half of March of this year was a study with the headline, COVID-19 may remain stable for hours to days on surfaces and in aerosols. And the findings showed that the COVID-19 virus was detectable for up to 4 hours on copper, 24 hours on cardboard, 2 or 3 days on plastic and stainless steel, and up to 3 hours suspended as an aerosol in air, with the half-life in air of 1.1 to 1.2 hours. Of course, this aerosol transmission would depend on the environment and wind conditions. In windy, outdoor conditions, this period of concern may be much shorter, but in an enclosed room without adequate ventilation, the concern would be much higher. With this evidence that sneezing, coughing, and even breathing can cause the virus to go into an aerosol state and may result in it hanging suspended in the air for 1 to 2 hours or longer, it may be useful to develop another dimension of concern and strategy. We already have social distancing, which is a distance or linear dimension. The new dimension that I propose is a time or timing dimension. Maybe we have to be concerned about entering an area or room or walking through an area that was recently occupied by an infected individual, hence a timing concern, another reason to stay at home. If one were on the side of the virus, an age of the enemy, so to speak, one would design an enclosed space where many uninfected victims would gather and wander about, and where also some COVID-19 infected people would wander casually about. The longer and the more often the victims attended this enclosed space, the more success in furthering the cause of the virus. Can anyone think of one of these enclosed spaces that meet all of these requirements? Maybe a grocery store. Hence the reason to shop for groceries less than once a week. Don't treat it as a social outing. If you're at higher risk due to age and pre-existing conditions, get someone else to do it for you. Another concern is the disconcerting evidence that 20 to 50% of infected individuals can be asymptomatic, meaning that they have no symptoms whatsoever. That means that half of our COVID-19 infected subjects don't know they have it. And those that will eventually get it and get symptoms can transmit the virus and cause the infection 2.5 to 3 days before their symptoms actually start. You have to assume that everyone you encounter could harbor the virus. Needless to say, it is imperative to err on the side of caution. Your life could depend on it. To illustrate how important each person can be, I'll give 2 documented cases investigated by contact tracing. One infected person in a crowded church room sat face to face with many uninfected people for several minutes. Within a few weeks, several thousand were infected. In a Washington state choir practice, one infected singer sang in the choir, and soon thereafter, 60 choir members tested positive. In a pandemic, what are our battle plans? We can categorize the potential strategy into 3 options. Number 1, do nothing. Doesn't sound like a good way to win the war, especially if the adversary is a tough one. Number 2, mitigation, defined as the action of reducing the severity, seriousness, or painfulness of what would otherwise happen. Number 3 is suppression, defined as defeating and conquering. I personally would have chosen suppression. By choosing a weak mitigation strategy, we delay the battle by possibly many months or even longer, and lose more of our army and of our citizens. Loosely recommending a weak mitigation mode sets the tone for a weak effort on the part of our citizens. Why did Europe and North America choose mitigation? And weak mitigation at that. In my patient experience, it has long been obvious that patient effort in making changes in behavior and lifestyle is never easy. The effort varies considerably from patient to patient. If I were to use an effort scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is a poor effort and 10 is an exceptional effort, it would be safe to say that patients managing 7 to 8 on this scale would satisfy my staff and myself. However, we do see patients with an effort level of only 1 on the scale, and others maybe at level 10. To maximize our chance of success, we generally spend several hours with each individual patient in the teaching and counseling process. It is very clear to us our success in this endeavor depends on not just telling our patients what to do, but why to do it. Self-isolation for those returning from out of the country had many known failures. Travelers actually lying about symptoms to be allowed on commercial aircraft. those driving back from the US, stopping for gas and groceries, and then going out regularly during the isolation period. US Air had more than 100 onboard attendants test positive for the coronavirus. As the early days and weeks progressed, our data in the West projected a worrisome outcome. There was an impression of panic by our leaders as they realized the effort wasn't enough. The data showed disaster. Our healthcare system would collapse. So a much more aggressive strategy was introduced, almost overnight, now threatening fines and possibly imprisonment. I would rate the new strategy somewhere halfway between mitigation and suppression. North Korea, Taiwan, and China, which I will call the East, were hit hard by COVID-19. Yet in a few weeks, they miraculously suppressed the virus in quick order. In contradistinction to Europe, Britain, and North America, which I will call the West. The East attributed their success to aggressive testing, aggressive contact tracing, aggressive travel bans, aggressive isolating, aggressive quarantining, and everyone wore masks. What's different in the West relates to the absence of the adjective aggressive. There's nothing in the West that could be described as aggressive. Testing is almost non-existent, with less than 1% of Canadians having been tested. Contact tracing is non-existent. Isolating and quarantining are not controlled and not well followed. And our health authorities were actually advising not to wear masks. Too many of our citizens are not following the guidelines. We need an effort level of 9 to 10, not 2 to 3. So what does all this mean? If we could turn back the clock by 4 weeks, and in a perfect world, if we could somehow have perfect compliance with aggressive hand washing, aggressive distancing, aggressive avoiding touching faces, aggressive isolating, and aggressive quarantining as required, we wouldn't provide a human host for the virus to reproduce in. Not able to reproduce, the virus would disintegrate and be no more. We would essentially be over the coronavirus epidemic in 3 weeks, maybe 4. If everyone understood this concept and the part they play, a much better compliance rate would likely be possible. However, it isn't a perfect world. There would always be the homeless, the handicapped, those in long-term care homes, prisons, etc., who would not have the wherewithal and the opportunity to follow all of these very strict guidelines required for the suppression strategy. Because the European and North American strategy was one of mitigation rather than suppression, the hope was to flatten the curve, to slow down the virus, to hopefully prevent collapse of the healthcare system. The mitigation strategy doesn't contain the epidemic, it only flattens the curve somewhat. The suppression strategy is totally aggressive immediately to stop the epidemic, easier to do in a state-controlled population like China. Does it work? Yes, proven in China, South Korea, and Taiwan. In a free society, concerns regarding erosion of civil liberties and the right to bodily sovereignty make the suppression strategy a much bigger challenge. Even though we started in a weak mitigation mode and progressed to a more aggressive one, with obviously better results, the effort is now threatened by many worried about the economy and the drive to get our country going. Switching to a super aggressive suppression mode wouldn't be easy. However, with a large number of enlightened foot soldiers, a significant impact may still be possible, thereby shortening the war. As each individual aggressively battles the enemy, they increase their chance of staying alive as an individual. However, it is the total group effort of all of the individuals that will win the war and save the economy and our healthcare system. Remember, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Thank you for tuning in. Remember, our doors may be closed, but our hearts remain open.
You get